Arika.
Arika is, and always has been, a fraud. Wait, hold on. No, that's the wrong script. Hold on a second. Here we go. Arika is a rock-solid development company, and one of the better-known companies that I'll be covering in this series. Arika was originally founded as ArmTech KK in 1995 by a number of employees who decided to leave Capcom and start their own company, and they eventually changed the name of the company to Arika in 1996. Now, despite a literal exodus, these ex-employees still enjoyed a good working relationship with Capcom, one secure enough for Arika to develop the Street Fighter EX series under supervision, a spin-off of Capcom's still popular Street Fighter series, in the following year. Capcom also published that game, its updates, and its sequels, as well as a few other projects Arika worked on, such as the original Tetris the Grandmaster, Arika's take on Sega's take on Tetris, and Arika's original Ever Blue games, a series based on underwater exploration. Arika also worked with a lot of other companies too, as the company has a reputation for being exceptionally adept at porting games between different sets of hardware. Arika's always had this reputation, ever since they started putting their EX series on ports for the PlayStation 1, even accounting for the fact that the arcade hardware they used was very similar to the PlayStation's hardware. That said, they really earned their stripes in 2002, when they first ported one of Cave's arcade shoot-'em-ups to the PlayStation 2. Co-development is probably their most consistent source of work, as they've been making solid ports ever since then. Their most recent work in that vein is Nintendo's 3D Classics line, and they even get second billing in the title screens for those games. They've also done some work on licensed games here and there, but outside of the Grandmaster series, they don't really make up a large part of Arika's output. And in the case of the Grandmaster series, it's actually quite stifling, but that's a whole other story. Now, in addition to the aforementioned Everblue games, Arika's also had a short burst of success with Everblue's spiritual successor, the Endless Ocean series, which is called Forever Blue in Japan. But overall, I'd say they're best known for their work on fighting games. They took a unique approach to fighters that a lot of people appreciated in one way or another, and I figured it'd be interesting to try and break it down. In almost every Arika fighting game, strongs and forwards are useful, easy to combo off of, and nearly universal. This is pretty much the opposite of most 2D fighting games, where light punches and kicks in some games are universal combo starters and the most important part of links. Furthermore, a lot of characters shared animations on their normal moves. Some say that Arika was just cutting corners by reusing animations like that, but I contend that it was their attempt at making their games easier to get into, and that they were corner cutting. In any case, the consequence of giving nearly everyone the same set of lights and mediums is that links are actually somewhat rare. They were still present, of course, but they were usually short, and most practical combos revolved around cancelling moves into stronger moves. Speaking of cancels, repeated super cancels is another Arika trademark. Every Arika fighting game featured the ability to cancel different supers into each other. The catch was that players couldn't cancel the same super into itself repeatedly. Point bonuses were another constant. Most fighting games give a perk for things like landing the first hit or performing a reversal, but Arika specifically gave the player meter for it, which in turn gave a slight boost to their super heavy nonsense. Universal arcing motions during mid-air falls made things odd, but it was part of Arika's style. Juggle combos might have been repetitive, but they were also easier to understand and use in actual matches. Simplicity was a big part of the company's overall approach to fighting game design. The mechanics themselves might not have been simple, and there was a lot of trial and error overall, but those mechanics always worked as advertised. Arika also dabbled in a few bonus stage gimmicks here and there. It was a sensible choice in Street Fighter EX2, as the Street Fighter series was where that particular style of bonus stage debuted, and both EX2 and EX3 had a neat little post-game beatdown session during the credits. Although the real innovation here lay in the fact that you could still skip the credits, a function that some developers still can't quite seem to grasp. However, their most notable bonus stages are actually found in Fighting Lair, a game published by Namco for one of Namco's arcade boards, where players could look forward to tossing around a giant suit of armor and fighting a shark underwater. Busting up barrels and cars is all well and good, but smacking a shark around takes things to a whole new level. Fighter customization, on the other hand, was something Arika dove into sparingly, but when they did so, they really committed to the idea. Street Fighter EX3 had a variation on the usual trend of blank slates by making one custom character, Ace, with a set story and design, but a customizable move list based on experience points gained in a separate mode. There are even 2 separate builds so that if players weren't satisfied with one, they could try and work with another. It didn't go over so well for 2 reasons. Most people didn't see the point in a customizable character with a fixed appearance, and a character that has to be groomed over time actively disrupts the idea of pick up and play fighting that most people enjoy. So Ace was usually ignored. Arika took another crack at customizable characters with Super Dragon Ball Z. One of the little mentioned truths about the game, in fact, is that it really opens up when you take the time to modify the abilities of the characters in the roster. Players could change a character's meter mechanics, add cancels, or even mix and match certain special moves. The drawback, once again, was that the dedicated customization aspect was too much of a time sink for most people to tolerate. Furthermore, the base game was arguably simplistic, and other games based on the Dragon Ball series had more appeal as fan service games because they had more characters and more attention to detail. Being heavily based on the manga's aesthetics rather than the anime's aesthetics probably didn't help. The changes made to the NSTC version of the PlayStation 2 port definitely didn't help. Arika has a history of making adjustments to their fighters. The original Street Fighter EX had 3 revisions and EX2 had 2. In fact, if I remember correctly, they even took a character out of this revision for EX2 and only added him to the PlayStation port, and then he was never seen again. But whereas those updates generally made big improvements to the base games, Super Dragon Ball Z's changes just watered the game down a bit. There wasn't much to water down, admittedly, as the game's strength lay in taking piecemeal mechanics and finding ways to string them together, but it was still a bummer and turned some people off of it. Still, Arika's done more good than bad over the years, and fans have recognized that fact time and time again. Street Fighter EX2 Plus still gets a lot of play, sporadic as it is, shuffling along in a zombie-like gait to bring the hype, and then walking back to its resting place at 1.5 character lengths per second. And EX3 had a pretty long run on the fringes of the fighting game community. If certain interviews are to be believed, some groups in the Philippines clung onto EX3's plasticky corpse until 2008. On top of that, there was a good bit of buzz when Arika put out a test video with some of their EX characters in 2011, running on tech equivalent to the 3DS. Nothing came of it directly, which left some fans feeling like they got hit with April Fool's Day early, but there's a good chance it might have paid off, at least for Arika. Not long after that, they found themselves helping out on Tekken 3D Prime Edition, a modified port of Tekken 6 that was released on the 3DS while the main Tekken team was busy working on the home ports of Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Or maybe this is just one of those crazy fan theories made out of a desperate need to justify some recent spike of frustration and disappointment. Either or. Ultimately, I feel like another Arika-led fighting game would be well received, especially now that we're entering another, quote, dark age, end quote, of fighting games. No single entry in the genre holds the title of the one true game anymore, so any fighting game can carve out a niche for itself, for the time being anyway. Keeping that niche to oneself is another thing entirely, as most games have the infrastructure in place to update and improve themselves constantly, and the capability to do so often turns into an imperative to do so from fans. And yet, as I've mentioned before, Arika has always been eager to update things when they have a clear shot to do so, which leads me to believe that they'd cope with said imperative just fine.